Welcome to Eclectos. We are called by God out of every nation to be a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and a peculiar people to show forth the praises of Him who has called us out of darkness and into His marvelous light. This podcast aims to explore this chosenness by providing a teaching resource from an Orthodox perspective for Christians looking to deepen their understanding of the faith to further their relationship and walk with God. And here's your host, Fady Hanna.
Good morning, my brothers and sisters. A blessed Lord's Day to each one of you. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. No PowerPoint presentation. We're just going to do it old school. But I actually want to talk about both today's gospel and tomorrow's gospel, the 14th and 15th of Epib, July 21st and 22nd of this year. So the gospel today is talking about, both of them relate to two same things. They're both, the disciples and Christ are headed up to Jerusalem, and He's already told His disciples what is going to happen. He will be rejected by the people, He will be rejected by the elders, He will be crucified, and He will be killed, and He will rise from the dead on the third day. And clearly these guys don't get it, because what's happening is they're having arguments. The first argument is, Christ is going to become a king, He's going to overthrow the Romans. Who's going to be the greatest in His kingdom? And they have an argument, and they get in a fight with each other, and they say, and Christ says, enough of this. Unless you become as one of these little children, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now, one thing that's absolutely needed for this interpretation, because this is one of those ones that's very poorly interpreted a lot of the times, He doesn't say here to become childish in your faith. He says to become a child. And what is a child? Someone who is trusting, someone who is innocent, but not childish. That means that we are to mature in our faith, that we are to grow in our faith. And the other part that we need to understand historically is that back then, babies and children were not considered so precious and cuddly and cute like we have today. I just recently had my first son, and it's amazing the amount of spoilage that happens with the kids these days. They're, the gifts, the amount of care and attention that we give to them. Back then, children were primarily born as a means of labor, and for the most part, especially little children, they were in the hierarchy no higher than stray dogs. Like literally, they were considered useless, and they were taking up resources from the family. In fact, in the Roman culture, there was what is called the pater familia, the head of the family, the head of the household, the father. He would actually inspect the child and see if the child was deformed or doesn't look good, or if he doesn't even need it anymore, he doesn't need any more kids. He would tell the servants or the wife to get rid of the child. And many of these children were discarded. And where the Christians came in is that they would take these children, especially by night, and would raise them and adopt them as their own. This is the love of the Christian world. This is the love of the Christian that brought to the world that didn't know Christ. And so the idea here is that we are to be mature in our faith, but innocent as a child in our relationship with God. And as parents, we understand how innocent our children are and how much they trust us and need us. The same works with God. In tomorrow's gospel, it's also a conversation that is being had towards Jerusalem. Same idea, but this time it's from St. Luke. And in this conversation, Christ has a multitude of people following Him, and they are on their way to Jerusalem, and He turns and stops and says to them something incredibly funny, ironic, and somewhat weird, to be honest with you. And He says to them, and it says here, this is from Luke chapter 14, "Now great multitudes went with Him, and He turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me, he cannot be my disciple.'" you're expecting something from Christ, saying something like, unless you love your father or mother or you love everybody, you can't be my disciple. What do you mean by hate? Well, we know this is figurative language because he's saying unless you hate your own life also, you cannot be my disciple. But Christ is not a politician. If he was a politician, he would have loved the multitudes that were behind him. The numbers are what speak. It doesn't matter who's behind him or what their motives are. But Christ does not care about the numbers. He cares about what is happening in the lives of each and every single individual. This is what I mean by the maturity of faith, not being childish in our faith, but growing up. Christ is looking at each and every single one of us with tomorrow's gospel message, and I hope that we go home and read it tomorrow. And he's looking and asking each and every single one of you and me, do you really want to become my disciple? Are you seriously committed? Commitment. C word. It's the one word that every Sunday school director can't stand. It's the toughest word for every Christian as an individual. Commitment. Are you committed to Christ? Because commitment shows maturity of faith. Being childish is somebody who doesn't commit because they can't bear responsibility. But when you grow up, as St. Paul says, I put away my childish things and I take on commitment. Why is commitment a problem for us as Christians and is a problem in every church? For two reasons. Number one, commitment is a problem because every time somebody says or something convicts you that you are not committed, the immediate reaction that we have is of defense. And we blame external factors why we are not committed. I'm too busy. The kids have soccer practice. I have to work 2 jobs. The services are too early. The services are too late. Sunday school is appropriate. No, it's too advanced for their age. So on and so forth. Commitment issues. The second part, and I think we have to be really honest with ourselves. Why we have a lack of commitment in our spiritual life is because, plainly, God is part of our life, not our whole life. What do I mean by that? You see, for God to be our part of our life, He's important, but He occupies the time. Maybe if other things are not competing, I will pray in the morning. If something is dangerous or hurtful throughout the day, I will talk to Him. If I'm not falling asleep or my favorite TV program is not on, I'll talk to Him in the evening. And, I'll talk to Him about things like, what can you get for me? Here's what I need. Here's my wish list. Here's what my kids need. Give us health, wealth, and happiness. My brothers and sisters, that is not a recipe for a growth of spiritual life. That is childish in faith, not the innocence of a child. We need to mature in our faith. So the message today contains 3 things that happen when we become mature in our faith. And in tomorrow's gospel, he talks about hating these things in comparison with our love for God. 3 things happen when we are committed. And if commitment is a C word, I'm giving you 3 other C words that you can think of for your reflection when it comes to commitment. When I commit my whole life to God, the first thing that happens is confession. Confession. If I truly understand and commit my whole life to God, I realize something very simple. I am completely inadequate and completely unworthy for the graces that He gives me, because I am sinful and in need of His help. And there is the only way for me to get out of this state that I'm in is His healing. How many of us, imagine if you had a disease, God forbid, but imagine if you had a disease where you need to take pills throughout the day in order to survive. Would many of us say that these pills that we are to take every single day that I don't have time for, or they're a part of my life? No, that would be the first thing I think of. It would be the last thing I think of. It would be something that I put in my phone to make time for, to make sure I don't forget. And yet when it comes time for us, this is the problem, when it comes time for us to pray or to spend time with God, we see it as a secondary thing a lot of times. If we understood truly our own sinfulness and what it truly means when we say, in the words of St. Paul, that I am the chiefest of sinners, I cannot start my day or go through my day without clinging and talking and having a relationship of intimacy with God. It can't happen. We have to start viewing sin as a cancer that needs healing. And it cannot be healed without a relationship with our Heavenly Father. The other thing that happens, if we are truly committed and we confess that we are sinners, is that I won't have time to judge other people. In fact, I'll be trying to find excuses for other people. Even when they hurt me, maybe this was the situation. Maybe this is something out of their control. You fool, Christ says. Take out the plank that is in your own eye first, and then look at the speck that is in your brother's eye. When we commit our whole lives to God, we confess our sins, confess our weakness, and confess that all of us need help. Secondly, when we commit our whole lives to God, our time, our resources, we gain clarity. Clarity. We begin to see what most of the world does not see. We hear it in the gospel, the prayer for the gospel, every time we have the liturgy. Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For truly I tell you, many people, many wise men and prophets have desired to see what you see and have not seen it. What is it that we are supposed to see? We are supposed to see God's handiwork in everything. And if we don't, we should be asking ourselves, have I committed my whole life to God? We are supposed to see what the world is and what it lacks. We should realize that nothing satisfies, nothing apart from God. It is God who fills and satisfies. We should not be, for example, looking to other human beings to satisfy the emptiness in our hearts. One of the greatest sources of problems in marriages and in relationships and in friendships is that we try to put our friends and our loved ones, our children even, in the place of God, in the sense that their relationship, their presence with us fulfills us. But the problem is they can't, and they won't, and they never will. But rather, when we start being satisfied with God and see that He is the only one who can satisfy us, we begin to love our loved ones in a different way, in a more peaceful and satisfying way. You see, when Christ says to us, hate your father and mother and children and land and all of these things to become my disciple, when we give God everything, He returns it right back to us in a brand new way. Our families need every single member to seek Christ with their whole heart, and watch what happens to our families as a result. Watch what happens. When Christ is not at the center of it, it falls apart. Our careers, our jobs, talk about looking at it clearly. For many of us, our careers really, if we're honest with ourselves, define who we are. The first thing that somebody introduces, it's very typical in our culture, right? You're an engineer, you're a doctor, bash muhandis, doctor so-and-so, all of these things. And that's lovely, it's nice. That cannot define us. That cannot be what we pursue and give meaning in our lives. Rather, when we give our whole life to Christ our God, He then takes our careers and transforms it into a vehicle that can spread the gospel. And that you, by your career, can not only make money, but also can be a channel to bring God to so many people. When we give our lives to Christ our God, we gain clarity in that what we do matters because it is for God. And it is for Him, and a gift that is offered to Him that He can then take back and use for His divine and perfect purpose. God will then begin to shape our life experiences, and everything will have a renewed purpose in our eyes. And finally, when we give our whole life to Christ our God, we gain our calling. I've said this in several sermons before, and we read it in the fraction of the Apostles' Fast, and it's in 1 Peter. Out of all nations He has called us a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and a justified people. A royal priesthood. The function of a priest is two things, primarily. Everything else is secondary. The priest is supposed to intercede on behalf of those whom he shepherds. Prays for them continually. Thanks God for them. Asks for help for them spiritually. When Abuna is going around prior to the Pauline with the censer, he's not just trying to fill the church with incense. He's marching like a soldier around the church. And what he is saying, I'm paraphrasing here, is basically, Lord, take all evil away from them and let the words that are going to be read right now go into their hearts, that their lives may be transformed. Interceding on behalf of those whom he shepherds. But the second one is that a priest reconciles people with God. He reconciles, whether it's through the sacrament of confession, or whether it's through everyday interaction, or it's through any of the sacraments. A priest reconciles, brings people closer to God. And sometimes that involves discipline. And sometimes that involves being hard so that you can get out of the state that you're in and enter into a better state in our relationship with God. We are all a royal priesthood. Yes, we have our priests who are set apart for the service of the community. But for example, and I'm going to pick on the husbands and the fathers now. At our weddings, we all wore the same priestly stole put around our shoulders, and we were anointed as priests and kings over our households. Why? Because being called Father means that we also get this responsibility, that we are to intercede on behalf of our family and our children, and that we are to reconcile our children and our families to God continually. And that involves the ugly word that nobody likes, discipline. Discipline has the word in it, disciple. If you want to become a disciple of Christ, you have to have discipline. Discipline. Our children, if they don't have discipline, will not grow in their relationship with God. That's just a fact. And a lot of times we read books about this, that, and the other, about how, we can try so many different things, but we are to discipline our children, discipline our families, and discipline each other and ourselves towards the kingdom. Fathers and mothers, you have the greatest joy and responsibility in that priestly calling. You are to reconcile your children to Christ continually. You are to love them, but loving them does not mean that we leave them in the state that they're in. We watch them grow. And by growing, they will have commitment. And growing, they will have life. Being committed to God is not easy. It's not supposed to be. It's really hard work. It's brutal. It's a daily task. And it's painful at times. But it leads to life. And that has been the message of the church from the beginning. The message of Christ. That we discipline ourselves. We commit our whole life to Christ our God so that we can have life. And I will leave you with the words that the Lord said through the great prophet Moses as he was about to end, his life was about to end, giving the last commands to the people of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy. Today, this day, I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May the Lord help us to commit not part of our life, but our whole life unto Christ our God, that we may see the land that he promised us and to our forefathers. To him be all glory with his good Father and the Holy Spirit, in his church forever, now and forever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen.
We hope you have enjoyed Eclectos with your host, Fady Hanna. Fady is a reader in the Coptic Orthodox Church and attends the Church of the Seven Altars in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. This has been an independent production with all references and sources included, and all opinions being that of the host. May God bless you tremendously and grant us a rich entrance into his eternal kingdom and transform us into his image and likeness. Thank you.